That summer, the river behind Grandpa's old house glittered like a secret, and we hauled out a weathered door to become a raft. The world felt wide enough to hold every mischief a child could dream, and the door, with its rotted edge and stubborn knob, became our little ship, clumsy and brave all at once. I was 7 then, the summer of sun that seemed to press the salt into the air, and Grandmother's porch swing swayed with the rhythm of a quiet, patient life that I didn't yet understand as poetry, only as supper and stories and a soft, safe place to land. We stood in a loose circle on the muddy bank, the water a glassy rumour that invited us to pretend we were sailors of some small, stubborn world. The air tasted of river mud and hot corn, of smoke from the kettle at noon, and the tang of the lilac hedge behind the shed. Grandpa walked with a careful steadiness, as if every step were a promise to a door that could not be broken, and he laid the door across 2 empty oil drums like a baby boat for a voyage we hadn't earned, but were ready to take anyway. The nails pressed into the wood had a story of their own, and I pressed my fingers to the grain, as if I could trace the river's line there, as if the door would whisper the exact course to us, if we listened hard enough. The first sound of the day was not birds or boats, but the creak of the door as we slid it onto the drums, a low, honest groan that felt like a greeting from an old friend. The second sound was the river's sigh, a long, patient exhale that carried the scent of weeds and sun-warmed clay toward us. The third was laughter, the cousins, my siblings, the few neighbours who wandered over with bare ankles and sunburned noses, and underneath all of that, a hum of music I didn't know was music. The steady babble of Grandfather's stories, his voice soft and rough at the same time, as if each sentence had to pass through a grate before it could land in our ears. We pushed off with a chorus of shouts that rose and fell like a tide, and the door began to float, not beautifully, but stubbornly, riding the river's patience rather than its whim. You could not tell where the water would push you, nor how many times you would have to twist your wrists to coax a drift back to its own path. The raft moved, a slow, stubborn thing, while the current wore away the day's heat with cool, slippery hands. The far bank blurred. The willows along the edge looked like old friends, leaning in to listen to our childish plans. The air smelled of pine resin and the faint sour sweetness of the river's life. The frogs squatting on submerged logs. The soft, almost shy rustle of reeds. The distant clatter of a farm waking up to work. Grandpa stood at the stern, a steady figure in the middle of a sea that looked tiny from the shore and enormous here, where the river's mouth tried to swallow us with a laugh. He wore the same denim shirt he'd worn since I learned to tell time by the clock on the kitchen wall, and the same old cap that always smelled faintly of tar and tobacco, a smell that to a child meant safety and the habit of keeping promises. He didn't say much beyond the basics: how to brace your legs, how to grip the paddle, how to lean just so into the turn. But when he spoke, it felt as if the river itself paused to listen. He told us to look not at the shallows, but toward the center, where the current wore a smoother edge, where a boat could ride rather than be scraped. He showed how to point with the paddle, how to let the water tell you when to pull, how to keep your shoulders loose, so a sudden touch of wind wouldn't toss you into the world's widening gap. We learned the simplest of lessons that day, how to trust a thing you cannot see completely, how courage sometimes wears the face of patience. The raft bumped over a shallow riffle, a spray of brown water kissing our bare legs, and I gasped, half in fear, half in awe. As the door pitched slightly and Grandpa's hand found mine on the edge, a warm, dry map of years that had seen both storms and quiet, the river answered with a long, approving hiss, and the laughter around us grew softer. The sound of everybody's water-worn souls meeting at a common beat. There was a moment, just a second really, when we slid past a stand of cattails and closer to a patch of reeds that grew like an outpost for dragonflies. The door felt, in that instant, almost a thing of ceremony, rather than wood and nail, as if it had chosen us to be its crew, as if the river's voice had called our names and granted us a small, sealed fate. The dragonflies hovered in a blue-green halo, skimming the water's surface with the precise calculus of a pilot, and for a breath I forgot to be afraid. I looked at Grandpa and saw the soft crease at the corners of his eyes that never fully disappeared. The way his lips curled up when he found a joke even in a difficult moment. The way his hands, big, calloused and careful, held the river in place for us, if only by stubbornly guiding the door forward. The raft drifted toward a bend where the current seemed to dip and slow, as if the river itself paused to listen to us. Grandpa told us to hold steady and let the door take the ride, and so we did. A handful of children with sun-streaked hair and hearts that beat with the sudden intensity of a day that wanted to say something true. The bend opened into a quiet pocket where the water ran clear and smooth, and the bank rose up with a dark line of trees and a scent of damp earth after rain. We were all silent for a spell. The way people are when they suddenly remember you will not always be there. The way silence can carry a mile of meaning in its quiet breath. In that hush, I learnt something I wouldn't have named then. Time can pretend to stall, but it does not stop. The river kept moving, and with it we learned to move with it. Hands gripped, knees pressed, breath measured. Eyes wide enough to hold a whole summer's truth, and not blink at the fear of falling into the great unknown that lay beyond our island of paper-thin bravery. When we finally turned back toward the shore, the door sang a little song against the water, a soft, tired happiness that made us giggle in relief and pride. We climbed onto the bank with dirt on our ankles and the world's edges a little brighter for having learned how to ride a door across a river. That evening, after we carried the door back to the yard and prop it against the shed, Grandpa tucked us under the shade of the lilac tree and poured cold lemonade that tasted of lemon peel and summer dust. The kitchen window behind him glowed with the light of a stove that would soon be used to bake bread, to coax cereal milk into a sweet, pale dawn of a morning after. We lay on benches and watched the light colour the leaves. The cicadas kept their drumbeat, loud but patient, as if reminding us that heat, like life, must be endured, then learned from. I remember the way the air cooled in the shade of the lilac, and how the river's memory pressed against my lips with the memory of sweat and salt, and a promise I didn't yet know I was making to myself, that a life worth living would be a life built from patient hands and small, faithful acts. The door still sits in our yard now, years later, a museum piece of a time when a boy could believe he could steer a river by the strength of a stubborn door and a kind old man's whisper. I tell my grandchildren about that day, the way you tell a soft legend you almost forgot to keep. The river's lessons did not end with that afternoon. They followed me into other summers and into the long, patient years of work and responsibility. I learned to build with scrap wood the way Grandpa built his life from patience and steady labour. I learned to hold on to people the way we held on to that door, with both hands and a little fear and a lot of gratitude when the current carried us forward and we found our footing again on the bank that had become our true home. Now, as an elder, I walk the same stretch of river in memory, when my knees remind me that I am not as quick as I once was. When the wind sounds louder, and the dusk carries that same damp, earthy scent I knew as a child. I pinch the air between two fingers and think of Grandpa's hands, the rough palm, the generous grip, the way he could steady a life by guiding a door across water. I think of the laughter we shared, a chorus that echoed through years and still echoes in the quiet rooms of my later days. The door did not simply float away that day. It anchored something in me, the belief that even a stubborn, ordinary thing could be a vessel for courage, that a child's tremor could be steadied by a patient elder's calm breath, that a river's honesty could teach a person to tell the truth to themselves. If I could tell the young me anything, I'd say, listen to the river when it doesn't shout. Listen to the stillness after the splash, to the pause between heartbeats, to the soft, ordinary ones that tell you you're alive and that you can meet the day with a neighbour's aid